All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Steve Mahoney. I'm with the Greater Hartford chapter of SCORE. I'm delighted to be joined by Marty Clayman today, who is going to be taking you through our topic, which is opportunities and pitfalls in buying a franchise. Before I turn it over to Marty, I wanted to tell you a little bit about SCORE. We are a nationwide organization made up of about 10,000 volunteers across the country. Marty and I are part of the Hartford chapter. And our sole mission every day at SCORE is to help small business owners. We provide mentoring services, one-on-one coaching. We offer workshops and webinars like this one. We have a whole host of resources on our website, articles, templates, videos, on-demand recordings of webinars, all sorts of resources in helping to get your business on the ground or up the ground or to grow it. The best part about SCORE services is that they're free. So if you're interested in learning more about SCORE, you can go to score.org. You could check out our resource library. You can sign up for mentoring services. And regardless of what kind of area of expertise you're looking for, whether it's finance, which I can help with, or legal, which Marty can help with, or marketing or operations, whatever kind of help you need, more than likely SCORE can find someone to help you out. So if you're interested, you can check that out at score.org. A few logistics before we get started. This session is being recorded. We will send a link to the recording out after the fact if you want to revisit any of the content. We've also muted all the microphones just to prevent any background noise, but we do want to hear from you. So if you have questions, we'll have some time at the end so you can ask questions. You can put them in the chat box or you can do it throughout the session and we'll address them as they come up. So with that, I will turn it over to Marty. And Marty, I'll start sharing my screen now with your slides and take it away.
Thank you very much, Steve. I want to thank SCORE for this opportunity to talk about franchising, one of my favorite topics. Very briefly, I was became acquainted with franchise law back in the 80s, if you can believe it. I've been practicing law that long. I'm now a retired attorney, but I specialized in franchise law and covered all aspects of franchising, including people who dealing with people who want to buy a franchise, people who wanted to start a franchise, and I even got involved with numerous franchise litigation matters. So I want to just first, before we turn to the first slide, I wanted to, okay, we're at the first slide, but I want to start out with a sobering statistic, which perhaps tells you why it is that I became interested in franchising, because I think it does a lot of good for a lot of people. There is a statistic, and it is based on information from the U.S. Department of Commerce that over 70% of all independent-owned businesses fail, within the first 2 years. So that's a very sobering statistic. And on the other hand, there is a statistic that on average, about 5% of franchise businesses fail over the lifetime of those businesses. So I thought that I could be helpful to my clients by guiding them and directing them in connection with people who want to buy franchises, people who don't want to start from scratch and figure this whole thing out on their own. So it's also, I think, of interest, historical interest anyway, that franchising is a unique American invention, shall we say, and started many years ago, back in the 1800s, when Isaac Singer, a famous Singer sewing machine person, started franchising by basically getting different people to sell his sewing machines under the Singer sewing machine name. And then it wasn't regulated in those days, so he did what he wanted to do. But apparently he was successful because that's a household name. Then after World War II, franchising really began to flourish with Johnson Wax, B.F. Goodrich, Pet Milk, Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward. They were all franchise business that came into existence. At this time, there are, and it keeps on changing every day, there are over 800,000 franchise and company-owned operations in the United States, accounting for over $1 trillion in sales. And the franchising industry employs over 17 million people. So that's a rather interesting statistic. And today you can go almost anywhere and you're going to find a franchise, one or more franchise business. Many of them, of course, are in the restaurant industry and the automotive industry because they are the ones that are perhaps easiest to proliferate. I think about the McDonald's, the Wendy's, the Subways of the world, and there were the brake shops and Amco transmissions and on and on and on. These are all franchised operations. So why do people, thank you, want to consider franchising? You're doing a great job, Steve. You're anticipating what I'm about to say. If a person or even husband and wife, whatever, partners want to start a new, let's say a retail business, and they want to branch out. They've got a business, let's say, they want to branch out. They have to do a number of things, and it's across all aspects of any type of bricks and mortar kind of business. I'm not talking about the internet businesses, it's a little bit different. But you've got to lease space, which of course involves security deposits and rent and tying up yourself for 3-5 years, usually. It could be less, but that's an average. You have to construct and install leasehold improvements, which are no small expense, purchase fixtures and equipment. And then if you're in an inventory intensive type business, you're gonna have to buy inventory. You're gonna have to have operating capital, and you're gonna have to carry a payroll and pay federal, state, and municipal taxes. The next slide would be great. In the event that you're involved in internet sales, then you're going to have to consider social media marketing and develop your own website. And websites can be very expensive if they're going to be done properly. So under a franchise agreement, the equation changes. Now, instead of the so-called franchisor or business owner, the entrepreneur making these investments, it's going to be the franchisee who makes the investment. I also should just at this point mention something that I didn't put in this slide, which I think is of interest, is I have a number of clients over the years who want to expand their business. So they go to a bank. I'm thinking of a convenience store franchise, a convenience store owner that I represented, and a automotive glass business that I represented. And both of them wanted to start expanding their business. So they went to the bank and they borrowed money for the expansion to be able to do the very things that I'm talking about. And then they went to their third, let's say, store. And what starts happening here is the banks, if you're going to go to a bank, they are going to cross-collateralize all of your loans. So if you borrow $500,000 for a bank, the $500,000 loan is on every single store that you have, because they're going to put a security agreement on there on all of your equipment, all of your inventory, all of your assets that you have. So if you want to sell one of those businesses off for whatever reason, you have to go back to the bank and beg the bank to give you a release. You owe the bank $500,000. And now they're going to negotiate with you how much money they want and how much they want in their pocket and how much you're going to be able to use for the very purpose that you went to the bank for to begin with. Another way of expanding your course is to get partners. And they put equity in the business. And then now you've got a partner, you've got other people telling you what to do or maybe disagreeing with you. You can't do it on your own. So the road to expansion is a difficult one to navigate unless you're fortunate enough to have capital. So now we take the franchise business. Who is the one who's going to pay for the leasehold improvements now? Who is the one who's going to pay for the bricks and mortar and the inventory and the equipment? It's going to be the franchisee. The franchisee is going to have to borrow the money. The franchisee is going to have to put in his or her own capital. So that's shifting all of the responsibility over to the franchisee. But this is, and there is, once the franchise is established, the franchising allows the franchisor to gain market share and develop brand awareness, possibly globally, if it's a big enough franchise. And it's all done on the back of the franchisee. So I find it fascinating to think that that's how the franchisor gets name recognition, gets brand awareness. It's not money that was spent by the franchisor, it's money that was spent by the franchisee to develop that brand, to develop that business under the franchisor's guidance and system. So you can turn to the next slide, Steve. Thank you. All is not heaven when it comes to becoming a franchisor. There are challenges. And some of the challenges are up on the slide. The franchisor can't really tell franchisees what to charge. This can become a problem if one of the franchisees decides to have a sale or to lower prices. The franchisor, in order to not avoid, in order to avoid antitrust issues, can only suggest pricing. They cannot make people charge certain minimum prices. So that becomes problematic. It's the franchisee now who hires the employees, not the franchisor. And the franchisees have to be in control of their own business. That's another requirement. So franchisor can't necessarily control the quality of the personnel, and sometimes the services are not up to par. Now, I've done a lot of work as an arbitrator with subway terminations. So I'm very, very familiar with how they operate. And this is an easy way to explain it to you. What Subway does, in order to be sure that their services and also their food are up to their standards, Subway standards, they have inspectors who come to the store once a month and go through the store from top to bottom in terms of, I've seen them write up reports that the cucumbers were not sliced properly, or that the vegetables were out of date because they have to put dates on the expiration dates of the fresh vegetables, or that the ovens were too hot or too cold. There's so many different aspects that they provide, and then they grade the franchisee on how well the franchisee did that month. And if they fail certain criteria, they're in danger of losing their franchise. And most of the Subway franchises that have gone out of business have gone out of business because the franchisor was very unhappy with the quality of the services and the personnel. Another problem that franchisors have is that they can't always make sure that every outlet in the franchise system is properly located. Sometimes certain businesses have to be located in a certain location, and they're poorly located and they don't thrive, they just survive. The franchisee runs the business, but things could be a lot better, and the royalties are very low compared to what they could be, and so that creates a problem. And the other is that you can't, which is sort of like part of what I was saying before, you can't regulate the buying power of the franchisee, and there not be adequate sales going forward. So these are some of the problems that franchisors have. Let me move on. This is a serious matter. Franchise locations. Again, I've represented a lot of franchisees, and I remember very well there was a franchisee that wanted to locate, I don't know how many of you people here are from the Hartford area or the Manchester area, but the Buckland Mall, when it first got started, One of my clients wanted to locate in the Buckland Mall, and it was a big brouhaha because there was no access from the outside of the mall. In other words, you had to go into the mall in order to get into the particular restaurant. And the franchisee wanted to be there because it was that time a very thriving mall. I understand they've fallen on hard times these days, but at that time was a very thriving mall. People wanted to go there. It was busy, and franchisee wanted to be there. And the franchisor said, "You can't open there because we have to have a door that leads to the outside so that people can park the car and walk right into the restaurant." Makes a lot of sense, but they fought and they fought, and finally the franchisee won out. And guess what? They lasted for about a year or two, and then they went out of business. Another problem that is a very serious problem is that franchisors can't just say, "Well, it's over. I'm going to terminate you." And there's a reason for that, that especially in Connecticut, we have franchise relationship laws in this state, and you cannot terminate a franchisee except for cause. So cause is basically found in the franchise agreement, or possibly due to fraud, or perhaps the franchisee tries to sell to another party without permission, or they maybe they sell products that are not authorized. Those are the kinds of things where cause can be found. So we'll move on. Those are some of the challenges. So how do franchisees benefit? And this is the opportunity part. I talked about the pitfalls perhaps a little bit, not entirely, but this is the opportunity part. And this is one of the big things. You take an executive, let's say, that's worked for a large corporation for many years, and after 20, 25 years of working, either they decide to get out of corporate world, or perhaps it was a merger, and now the executive finds that his job is redundant and he can't stay there for whatever reason. There are all kinds of reasons why people leave after working for a large corporation for a number of years. So they're familiar with how their company runs. They've had no other familiarity. So now they want to go and they're thinking about a franchise. Well, the benefit of buying a franchise is that the person who buys the franchise doesn't have to have experience or knowledge about that particular business, because the franchisor is going to provide that knowledge and provide that information, and have, through training programs, is typically what they do. I mean, all franchisors will train the franchisee. This covers basically the first two bullet points here. So the executive now will know how to operate the business, and there's a lot of hand-holding that goes on at the very beginning, and the franchisee gets the advantage of not having to be experienced, because the franchisor, which hopefully has been in business for a while and has some success, has the experience, has the knowledge, and also has the services, and the franchisee can get up and running with a minimum amount of education and trial and error. That's the whole idea. You avoid trial and error. The franchisee is able to take advantage of advertising and marketing, even if they, what happens here is that franchisors will provide templates, they'll provide marketing advice, they'll lead them to the franchisees, the proper marketing and advertising. And as you probably see on TV, many of these businesses will advertise on TV and now social media, and it gives the franchisee the advantage, providing there's name recognition. So the biggest problem that you have, and one of my clients fell into this trap, is that it was a restaurant started out here in Connecticut and was very, very successful, and then decided they were going to jump and start selling franchises nationwide. In spite of my advice, don't do that. And they jumped over to California, Washington, Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a disaster because the franchisor didn't have the manpower to check these stores out and make sure they were following the guidelines and the marketing manuals. Every franchisor has an operating manual, and a lot of these franchisees, they weren't following the guidelines, the operating manual, and that was the thing that made the business successful. Another advantage is even after the business gets started, the franchisee gets the benefit of the franchisor's continuing advice, research, and development. And I find that well-managed franchises, the franchisor has annual events where people get together and they talk about what the future is and what new products and services are coming along, and they get people together as a team to learn about all the various activities, events, and what research and development is going on by the franchisor. So I'll be happy to look at the next slide. The opportunity to be able to develop increased sales volume due to the brand recognition is very, very important. This is one of the reasons why I always caution my franchisee clients. I call them the Z's and the Zors as shorthanded. One of my Z clients, try to buy an established franchise. Don't buy a newly created franchise. Usually the newer startup franchises, they don't have the experience. They don't have, most importantly, the brand recognition. And brand recognition is critical here. That's why one of the reasons why people should be able to buy a franchise is brand recognition. And then people don't have to think about, well, should we go into this store? I have to tell you this little aside. My wife and I, many, many years ago, I think we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, and we went to China. And we ended up, first of all, we ended up in Hong Kong. And after we got ourselves a little bit situated, we were waiting for a train to take us to Guangzhou, which is used to be called Canton. And my wife was starving, I was hungry, and you'll never believe it. We saw a sign, it said McDonald's. And I said, well, we don't want to go to McDonald's. Let's get some dim sum. Let's go get some Chinese food. And my wife said, I don't know anything about these restaurants. Let's go to McDonald's. We know what we're going to get. So we traveled thousands of miles, hours and hours of plane travel. And we ended up, our first restaurant in Hong Kong was McDonald's. So that goes to show you the attraction of brand recognition. It's just amazing. So one of the most important reasons why you may want to buy a franchise is what do you have is a business. And if you have a going business and it's making money and making profit, then you have that business alone is a commodity and you can sell that business. Sometimes it's such a valuable business that the franchisor will buy it back. They would like to get that business back and they'll operate it as a company store. Other times, you'll just be able to sell the business to somebody else who wants to come along. Well, that person, it's not a simple matter. That person has to be approved by the franchisor, having the capital, having being educable, being in a position of looking like a franchisee that the franchisor would like to have in the system. And not all people who want to be franchisees are selected by the franchisor. They have in mind the type of individual, the background, the experience, the knowledge, the capital, the financial stability of somebody who can come in and operate a franchise. And the other thing about buying a franchise is that today, especially today, almost any business is franchisable as long as it can be replicated. And so the ones that are most easily replicated are, and I mentioned earlier on, automotive products and services, fast food services, maintenance, recreation. Most retail businesses can be replicated, and even tech services can be replicated. So that's the whole idea. When people come to me and they say, "I'd like to form a franchise. I want to start franchising my business," I'm going to want to try to find out how easy or difficult is it for this business to replicate itself. If it can be replicated over and over and over, then somebody, you have people out there who will buy it, presumably, and it isn't that difficult to teach people how to run that business, and then you can have uniformity throughout your system. Moving ahead, I see we're about a half an hour into our, okay. So why is it that it may not be a good idea to buy a franchise? Franchising really isn't for everybody. There are people who just don't want to follow somebody else's systems, or they don't want to be instructed, this is what you must do and this is what you can't do. So I'll give you a number of examples of why it just doesn't make sense for certain people to buy a franchise. Well, first of all, as you can see by the slide, it's now, and I've mentioned this before, it's up to the franchisee now to gather together the capital and to assume the economic risk of failure. Now, franchising is considered to be a relatively low risk type of business, but it isn't riskless. It isn't risk-free. All businesses have some modicum of risk, and some more and some less. So there is a risk of failure. And what people, generally speaking, have to do, and not everybody, but they have to borrow money or use their own capital resources. And using your own capital resources, that's one thing, because if you lose the business, well, you lost your capital. But if you have to go out and you have to borrow money from a bank, or perhaps the SBA does give loans to franchisees from franchises that have been in existence for a while, show stability. If you have to do that, they're going to most often request a mortgage on your home, if you have a home, or other collateral that you're going to have to put up. And they're going to perhaps want the husband and the wife, if you're married, to sign the note. And if there is a failure, it could be a real hardship on individuals who don't make it. So that's the risk of economic failure. The other, shall we say, risk is that once you've learned the business and you're operating, let's say 2-3 years, so you know the business, you know everything that has to be done, but yet your franchise agreement is going to provide that you have to pay royalties for the benefit of using the franchisor's trademark and system as long as you own that franchise. So you have to continue. You may be paying anywhere between 3 to 7 or 8% in royalties. You may be paying 2 or 3% in advertising fees, and you're going to have to get maybe 10%, 11% of your gross sales are going to go towards advertising and royalties. So that's a substantial slice off the top of the profits that you might be making. Some franchisees resent that, and they start resisting, and they don't like it. So you have to know yourself and know whether you're the kind of person who understands that it's going to be necessary, that as long as you're a franchisee, you are going to have to pay royalties, and you're going to have to pay advertising fees, And there may be other fees. There may be fees to continue to update your computer programs. There may be internet, intranet fees. I've seen all kinds of fees. And so it's that important to understand what the franchise agreement is all about. Ours are very long when you are a franchisee, because it's your baby. Now, I just had recently someone who contacted me and told me that it was a haircut salon, and the person said, "Gee, I don't know anything about haircuts. I'm not a licensed beautician. I don't have any licenses, but I was told by the franchise broker that this is a passive. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to work. I just hire they're barbers, let's call them, or cosmeticians, and that's all I have to do." I says, I think that this is a myth. In my opinion, it's mythical to think that you can own a franchise and be away and not be attentive to the business. So if you want to be successful as a franchisee, I don't care what any franchise broker or salesman tells you, you got to be there. You've got to work long hours. You have to be very attentive for that business to be successful. Another thing that's really important is that you have to rely on the franchisor for the availability of products. Think of Carvel, think of Midas Muffler Shop. Midas Mufflers, you're going to buy Midas Mufflers. You can't buy somebody else's mufflers. So if Midas Mufflers decides, and they probably have, well, we have to go up on our prices. We have supply chain issues. We have product issues. Carvel says we are having trouble getting our mixes. They're from overseas. And I'm not saying this is true. I'm hypothetically discussing this. And you're going to have to pay more for these products. Well, that can happen. Or maybe they're not available at all. That can happen. And then you go to the franchisor and you have to say, I have to be able to buy product to stay in business. So I want to go someplace else and I want to buy the products from somebody else. I found an alternative source of supply. And the franchisor is going to say, well, we have to test it. We have to look at it. We have to review it. And it will all be spelled out in your franchise agreement if you were looking to change your resource of buying your products. So that could be a real problem for a franchisee. Next slide, Steve. Okay, so there are other potential problems. Conformance to the franchisor system, which I've already discussed, is something that's a must. There will be, every franchisor will provide the franchisee with an operating manual. The operating manual could be, I should say operations manual. The operations manual could be on a 100-page document, could be a 1,000-page document. I've seen the Subway operations manual. It's a gigantic, thick compendium of rules and regulations, very, very detailed in every sense of the word, about cleanliness, about sanitation, about food products. It goes on forever. And they even have a school that you can go to. A franchisee can go to a school, get refresher courses. They will provide you information online if you need the information. And you've got to follow that operations manual. And that's the road to success with respect to Subway. And Subway is just an example of one of many. One of the issues about franchising is that a lot of franchisors will not provide the franchisee exclusive territory. Some people think, well, I'm going to get an exclusive. Nobody else within a 20-25 radius of me can sell the product that I'm selling. And I remember, again, another situation where one of my clients wanted to become a Gloria Jeans coffee beans. I don't even know if they have this product anymore, but it was Gloria Jeans Coffee Beans franchise in it was in the mall. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of the town, but it was downstate in Connecticut. And it turned out that Gloria Jeans was selling coffee online. People could either call or get online and order coffee beans for themselves. So the franchisee came to me and he said, "What can I do about this? This is not working. I've got a coffee franchise, and now there are Gloria Jeans is selling coffee online to other people." Carvel's did the same thing. They used to sell their ice cream pies, and then one day they decided to sell them in supermarkets. So franchisees were all up in arms, and there was a huge lawsuit over this whole thing. Don't ask me how it came out. I frankly don't remember, but it was a major lawsuit that went up to the federal court, and I think on appeal, it went on for years. All the franchisees ganged up against Carvel, and a major lawsuit ensued. Another problem would be encroachment by other franchisees. This was a major problem with hotels. Somebody would go out and hotels, as you know, most of them are franchises. So somebody would go out and they'd build a Hilton. Again, this is not a real thing. This is hypothetical. They would build, let's say, a Hilton or a Quality Inn and put in $3 million, $4 million on a hotel. And the next thing they would find out was that another hotel was opening up 3 miles down the road. And that is what is called encroachment. And franchisees without exclusive territories, many of them will encroach. Some of you may have seen Dunkin' Donuts, well, they don't call it Dunkin' Donuts anymore, Dunkin' restaurants, either across the street from each other or down the street from each other or around the corner, because they have no exclusive territories. And I've had clients that have had problems with Dunkin'. And they basically say, if your gross sales drop by more than 10%, then we'll give you relief from your royalties. Otherwise, you're stuck with it. And so this is something that is a major concern. And you have to know what the franchisor is going to do and what they're not going to do when you read the agreement. Another major problem that some franchisees have found is the franchisor will not make a commitment to provide assistance or advice after the franchisee opens his or her business. I've had that happen with a number of my clients where the franchise agreement was totally devoid of any assurances, of any assistance or any information or anything after the business opens. So what they do is they have to pay the royalties, they have to pay the marketing fee, the advertising fees, they have to run the business, and they got to figure it out for themselves. So a lot of this is agreement specific. It isn't an indictment of franchising per se, but there are a lot of people who just buy franchises, unfortunately, and they don't get adequate representation to make sure that they understand what they're signing. People say to me, well, Marty, I'm buying this franchise and I've got a PhD in English. Okay, so I can read very well and I understand everything that's in this agreement. And why do I need a lawyer? And I would say to them, well, I mean, you can certainly understand everything that's there, but how do you know what should be there that isn't there? Or for that, you need a professional, somebody who knows what ought to be in this agreement, but is not in the agreement. So don't think that you know everything just because you know how to read or you know how to understand or interpret language. And there is a lot of jargon that crops up in these agreements that you think says one thing and it really says something else. Only a lawyer who's experienced in franchising will understand that. And the last, one of the last items is this failure to make changes to meet marketing trends. I mean, this has happened so many times with franchisors who just do the same thing over and over and over again. Restaurants that don't try to introduce new foods or new food products or change the ingredients in the food products, less salt, the trend of healthy eating has come up and has been here for quite some time, and there are franchisors that are still advertising. We've got a triple cheeseburger with cheese and bacon and this and that and the other thing. Okay, well, there is an audience for that, but there are a lot of people now who don't eat that way, and they would rather have something light, a salad. And so there are a lot of these franchisors. McDonald's is one example. They've changed their menus to meet these trends, but a lot of them don't do that, and you have to be hopefully sure that this doesn't happen to you. Now you can move on to the next slide, Steve. The trademark protection is, this is really important because franchisors, and I always tell anybody who wants to get into franchising, have to have a federally registered trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So if you don't have that, for example, and you are a franchisor offering a franchise in Connecticut, the franchisor under our Business Opportunity Investment Act, which very few people know about, unless you're a lawyer, generally you don't know about it. We have a Business Opportunity Investment Act, which requires every franchisor to register with the Banking Commission in the state of Connecticut before you can sell a business opportunity. And by definition, a business opportunity is a business opportunity that does not have a federally registered trademark. Now, there are state trademarks and there are federal trademarks. And in Connecticut, you could get a state trademark if you're only conducting business in Connecticut. But franchisors want to conduct business in an interstate commerce, so therefore they need the federal trademark. So I had a client that bought. I'm going to tell you. Bought a franchise. I'm just writing this down. Bought a franchise, and it did not have, or was trying to buy a franchise. Excuse me. Came to me. I looked over the document. And I didn't see the R in the circle in the cover page. That was a clue right away that they did not have a registered trademark. And if you're looking, I think it's item 14, they talk about trademarks. Item 14, and if we have time, I'm going to get into this, but may not have time. But one of the items in the franchise disclosure will tell you what the registration number is of the trademark, and you can look it up on the USPTO. So this client, and the name of it was New York Pickle Deli, NYPD. And I said, well, it was not a registered trademark. I said, you've got to be really careful about this. I'm not sure that you want to go ahead with this. So I was subscribing at that time to the Entrepreneur magazine. I don't any longer, but I was. And I looked, I used to look through it and all the new franchises, that we call it the Franchise 500. And guess what? I found a NYPD restaurant franchise in Entrepreneur. I couldn't believe it, NYPD. And I just was dealing with this NYPD, New York Pickle Deli. Well, this company had a registered trademark, NYPD, except that it was New York Pizza Delivery, not New York Pickle Deli. And so I called up my client. I said, you're not going to believe this, but I hope you haven't gone ahead and bought this franchise, because here is a shining example of why you've got to be so careful about buying a franchise that have federal trademark protection, because somebody had NYPD in New York Pickle Deli, and that wasn't registered, but New York Pizza Delivery was. So another concern is I think it's item 16 in the franchise disclosure document, the franchisor can estimate gross sales and profitability. And they're supposed to do averages. There is a formula for how you do this. It's way beyond the scope of this workshop to talk about it. But it's scary, because sometimes the franchisor will be very, very on the edge or over the edge in estimating gross sales and profitability. And so a franchisee thinks she is buying a franchise where sales of other franchises I'm talking about, these are existing franchises, are really great. And turns out that that new franchisee is not doing very well. Another problem is these restrictions that I told you this before, again, that you can't just turn around and sell your business at a drop of a hat. You've got to go and you have to ask the franchisor for permission. So I had a client, again, I'm unfortunate, I've had all these experiences, who owned a Boar's Head route. It was like a franchise, and wanted to sell the route. Boar's Head, sold meat products primarily to usually the junior supermarkets, convenience stores. They all bought Boar's Head meat. And so my client said, I've got a buyer, all cash, for $250,000 for my route. And I went to call it the franchisor, and the franchisor turned me down. I said, why? Because I was getting too much money. I overpriced my business and it wasn't fair. And I told the franchisor, is this a cash transaction? It's not going to hurt anybody. They don't have to go borrow the money. No, you're getting too much money for your business. You're going to have to, we don't want you to get any more than $200,000. And is either going to court and fighting with these people, or he had to reduce his price, and he did, in order to sell the business. The next item, it doesn't happen too often, but every once in a while, you find there are breakaway franchisees. It's a pitfall. I'm not sure it's something you can prevent or negotiate away or bargain away. What happens, and this has happened in the past, where franchisees are disgruntled with the franchisor. Either they find that they're being overcharged on various items, or the businesses are not doing well, which is usually what the problem is. The businesses are not doing well, and for one reason or another, the franchisor isn't doing enough marketing. It could be the cost structure. It could be that they haven't kept up with trends. And now franchisees start to break their franchise agreements, and they call them breakaway franchisees. And they go off and they may end up opening their own businesses, and which is illegal, because most, if not all, franchise agreements have covenants against competition that usually run 2, 3, 4, 5 years after the termination of the franchise agreement. So that's a concern, and one which it's just a pitfall, and it happens to some people, but it fortunately happens rarely. Inconvenient locations, I think I discussed that. Oh, I'm sorry. This is inconvenient location for dispute resolution. I read this slide too fast. This is a concern. If you're a Connecticut franchisee and you have to go to California for because you have a complaint, or worse than that, the franchisor sues you in California for a real or imagined default in your franchise agreement, then you may have to hire a lawyer in 3,000 miles away to represent you for arbitration or mediation. That's one concern. Another concern is when it comes time to renew, all bets are off. The franchisor has the right to change the contract, increase the advertising fees, increase the royalties. It's a brand new contract. And if you don't want to do it, then you're stuck with, again, a non-competition agreement. And you may have inventory, equipment, a lease, and a number of other things that you're already stuck into. And you've got to worry about what are you going to do then. Product tie-ins and increased costs relate to exclusive vendors and suppliers. I mentioned this, or touched on this before, where maybe they're raising your prices, and it could be a common product. I've had this happen to clients of mine. They're common products. I remember it was a restaurant, and it was napkins or something, and they had to have a specific vendor for these napkins, or maybe it was the weight or the quality. Okay, the napkins kept on going up and up and up. And they said, we want to go and buy these napkins from somebody else. And the franchisor said, no, we're not going to let you do that. I told you about non-competition constraints, restraints. This is something that everybody has to deal with, is a non-competition. Non-competition agreements have to be reasonable. So they have to be reasonable as to time. It's called a temporal restraint. And they have to be reasonable as to distance, the area, the non-competition area. So if you're running a restaurant and the franchisor says, well, you can't compete within a 100-mile radius of your restaurant, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The courts won't uphold that, but they will uphold it if it says you can't operate within, let's say, 20 miles of any restaurant in our chain, wherever it may be located. That would be upheld no matter where it is. So if it's a reasonable location restraint, a reasonable time restraint, they're upheld. Otherwise, no. Another one that's a concern is the term of the franchise. In Connecticut, I think we have a law that says a no franchise can be for fewer than 3 years. Well, that's a very short term. And I usually tell my clients, you want to get a 10-year contract, 7-year to 10-year contract, 3 years, 5 years. You have to make an initial investment anytime, and you're going to lose money when you first open your business. So that's a concern. And you should not have, you've got to have an opportunity to recoup your investment and start getting into profit. So that's a concern. Inadequate training is something that you don't really know, unfortunately, until it happens. But fortunately, you do have in your the disclosure agreement and document, and in the franchise agreement, they do have they're required to tell you what the training consists of, how long, where, what the topics are, and you should look at those very carefully and make sure that you're comfortable. Those are all pitfalls before you buy. And another one is, which I again mentioned, competition from the franchisor. You would think that the franchisor would be happy to sell the franchisee, you get royalties and advertising fee, but unfortunately, most franchisors, they have alternative channels of distribution, which means they may sell other products in your territory that supposedly don't compete with you. They may have internet sales. They may have national accounts. This was I remember one of my clients was a trophy company, and it was a franchise, and the franchisor said, well, we have national accounts, very large corporations, and they buy these trophies and other they're not necessarily recognition documents for service, years of service, or somebody who's shown themselves to be exceptional at what they do. They buy these not devices, but they buy these items for the employees. So they're national accounts. Mail order is another example. So all these are potentially where the franchisor is going to compete. I told you about Gloria Jean's, Gloria Jean coffee beans as an example. And lastly, I guess, is the default clauses. Some of these default clauses are very onerous. And some of them have minimum sale requirements. In other words, you've got to be able to show your gross sales equal or exceed a certain level within, let's say, a year or two after you buy your franchise. And you've got to sell, let's say, $500,000 worth of services or merchandise. And if you don't do it, you're in default. And if you're in default, then they terminate the franchise. And that can be a very serious matter. So again, it's a matter of understanding what you're signing before you sign it. How are we doing here? Maybe we should want to, well, they're perfect. We're going to talk about the tips that I wanted to offer. First and foremost, if you're interested in buying a franchise, you really owe it to yourself to visit at least 3 other franchise locations and talk to the existing franchisees get your questions answered the best you can about the culture, about the profitability. The franchisors, generally speaking, can't tell you how much money you're going to make. There are laws about this. That's why they have to be very careful about their giving you estimates. It's done under a formula and not just on a cocktail napkin. People always say that the numbers are on a cocktail napkin. You should always save those cocktail napkins if you have a drink with the franchisor. It may come in handy. But this way you get a really good understanding of what franchisees are really doing or making, what their gripes are, what's happening that they don't like, what are their regrets. You can get a world of information. If you do end up with a store lease, you have to remember that if you buy a franchise and it's 5 to 7 to 10 years, well, you're not going to get a 10-year lease to begin with. But to the extent that you can, you should try to coordinate your lease with the term of the franchise. You don't want to find out that you've got too much lease and no franchise, or too much franchise and no lease. They're both a problem. And there's only so much you can do, but I just tell you this so you can keep in the back of your mind. The third item is something that you're not going to generally find in any franchise agreement. But I try on behalf of my clients to negotiate for an early termination period, let's say up to maybe 2 years, 3 years. If it turns out you're not happy with the franchise, you're going to lose your franchise fee, which could be a substantial sum of money. And you may be able to sell your inventory back to the franchisor. You may be able to sell your equipment back to the franchisor. And if you have a lease, you're going to have to do the best you can to terminate that lease, get out of it. But if this is not going well for you, it's better to cut your losses sooner rather than later and hang in there for a number of years and find that you're not making any money, you're using up your savings, your life is a mess. So if you can possibly negotiate for an early termination period, you're doing yourself a great favor, and it covers a multitude of sins. Another item that people don't think of doing, they don't think they can do it, but you should try to negotiate for a 3 to 6 month deferral or deferment of royalty and advertising fees. You stop to think about it. When you start your business, you're not going to be making any money. Your chances are for the first 6 months to a year, you're going to be in the hole. And wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about paying royalties? Royalties, by the way, and advertising fees are almost always based on gross sales. So they don't care whether you're making $50 and it's 5% of 50 or 5% of 5 million. The fact is they're going to get their royalty off the top. And if you're losing a lot of money, and you're going to pay royalties off of gross sales, and you don't have the net income to support it, this can end up putting you behind the 8 ball. I have a few more, I think, 3 more anyway. I've seen a number of clients buy franchises where there was no provisions for post-opening assistance or advice. And that is something, I'm circling around, I mentioned this before, but this is so important to make sure that you get post-opening assistance and advice for a period of time without cost, other than if the the franchisor has to travel for, other than around the corner or in the same town, if it's cost of travel for a personal visit. I told you about the federally registered trademark. I don't have to go over that again. And another issue that comes up, not all the time, but some franchisors tell the franchisee they want both the wife and the husband, if they're married, to sign the franchise agreement, even though the husband or the wife, it doesn't make any difference who, is going to be the franchisee. And this is actually unfair because the other spouse has nothing, has nothing to do with the business. And they do this because they're afraid, the franchise is afraid that if the franchise agreement terminates, then the spouse will open up a business selling the same product and that spouse is not a party to the franchise agreement. So that means the spouse and the franchisee get around the covenant not to compete. But I don't care. That's the risk that the franchisor should have to deal with, and the franchisee shouldn't have to worry about putting his or her house on the line if the house is in the wife's name and the husband is the one who's buying the franchise, or vice versa. I think I've used up my hour. Well, so the summary here. Obviously, it's do your research means do your due diligence. Check it all out before you sign on the dotted line. Go visit those franchisees. Go ask yourselves the questions. Is this beneficial to me? Are there too many problems? Go to a lawyer or an accountant or a financial advisor or somebody who is knowledgeable about franchising and get advice. Believe me when I tell you that, and I've always said this, it is not an expenditure, it's a savings. If you go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars and find out you made a mistake, you're going to find out it's a lot better to spend a little bit of money up front and get help. Number two is just like number one. Make sure you ask a lot of questions. Go to the franchisees, have discussions with them. If they won't talk to you, that's a concern too. Why shouldn't they talk to you? Why shouldn't they say, we never get together. The franchisor doesn't provide any information to us. We don't know what's happening. Franchisors will generally tell you they have a newsletter, they have a hotline, they're going to have meetings, periodic meetings of franchisees, and that's what they should be doing in a franchise, a well-run franchise organization. I think I've indicated to you on number three that there are challenges, there are pitfalls, but there are pitfalls, obviously, as you can see, in trying to open up your own business and facing the challenges that you don't know what the price points are. You don't know if you're located in the right place. You don't know if you should be borrowing as much money as you are. You don't know if you're buying too much inventory or not enough inventory, or maybe your leasehold improvements aren't attractive as they should be, or you didn't do enough with that. So these are concerns, and franchising eliminates all those concerns. And most of all, whatever you do, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, you're going to be putting in time and you're going to work hard and you're going to do it on your own. If you were an entrepreneur without a franchise, you're going to do the same thing. I don't care what your franchisor tells you. You want to be successful, you're going to work hard to do it. I think that's it.
Well, Marty, that was fantastic. And we'll wrap up in a couple minutes here. And I'd invite, if folks have any questions, they can put them in the chat box. We can go for a few more minutes here, but want to be respectful for folks' time. Marty, great advice throughout this whole thing. You've obviously demonstrated your expertise in this field. The nuggets that you provided and the real world examples were very insightful to me, not knowing a lot about the franchising world. I particularly liked your point at the end about utilizing experts. I say this to a lot of my clients in any business, and I tell them to look at hiring a business attorney or an accountant as an investment. It's an investment in their business to prevent any problems down the line.
That's how I look at it. Part of the investment is hiring the lawyer to give you the correct advice if the person is knowledgeable in that industry. Yes,
exactly. We did get a question about very early on about what's the best franchise to start, and I have to imagine there's no answer to this one, right? The way I interpret, based on hearing your advice here, is thinking about a few key aspects of looking at a franchise. Obviously, your understanding and expertise of the business, the location, the financial outcome, but also something I hadn't thought of, but just kind of how the franchisor treats the franchisee in terms of the practices, the policies. That was kind of what I took to it. And if you could find, something that checks all of those boxes, that opportunity might be the best one, regardless of what industry or what brand name it is. Is that a good way to think about that?
I think so. To find franchises, I like this Entrepreneur magazine. They have every February, I think it's January, February, they come out with the Franchise 500. Probably can order it, or today you can probably go online and get a lot of information. But this is part of the due diligence. You know how much money you have available, or what your financial capacity is. I mean, if you got no more than $100,000, you're going to buy a very inexpensive franchise, something that does not involve bricks and mortar, inventory, equipment, things of that nature. But if you've got more money to spend and you've got some expertise in a given area, then you're going to be looking for something a bit more substantial to get your teeth into. And with the first franchise, you may not make a lot of money. Some people have to buy 2 or 3 or 4 of them. I know people who own a half a dozen Subways. I know I had one client own 16 Burger Kings throughout Cape Cod area, because I have a home at the Cape, and I met him. And so there are people that buy multiple franchises, and they're making a lot of money. They're making a ton of money. So it's real. If you have an automotive background, maybe you want to go into the automotive industry and look into that. But most of it is due diligence and getting the information. And I will say another thing, it isn't everything, but the franchisors almost always have what they call Discovery Day, and where they want you to come to their shop and kick the tires and talk to the people and see what they do. Maybe go to a couple of either stores if it's that type of a franchise. Whatever it is to get a warm and cozy feeling, into the franchisee, and make him feel better, him or her feel better.
Well, it's great advice throughout this whole session. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Marty, thank you very much for all of your insights, and we appreciate it. And again, if folks need any help with their business, whether it's on franchises or anything else you're considering, you can find more help at score.org. Our chapter is at greaterhartford.score.org. And again, you can sign up for free mentoring services or check out any other resources we have. And with that, I will call it a day. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.